let's spin over for a second. So Ford Motor Company, I've been covering and following this whole thing for months now. Brittany couldn't wait for me to get back to this. Brittany B couldn't wait for me to get over to this. I don't even want to see Brittany right now. I'm glad that the the Patreon meetup is about a week and a half from now instead of it being this weekend, because I don't want to hear Brittany talking stuff about Union Strong, Anton, we holding it down, $200 an hour. I don't want to hear none of that, Brittany. I'm going to wait till this is all done. Let's hopefully get this all taken care of before I see y'all in D.C. on November 4th. Shout out to the Bag Chasers that's going to be there. But Brittany couldn't wait for me to get to this part of the show. Ford Motor Company tentatively reached an agreement with the UAW, and it was announced yesterday. Now, I have a little bit of insight as to why that happened, and we're going to mine it out completely. But let's go ahead and get this popping. Make sure you hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. What's going on over here? I ain't got no article. Here we go. All right, we popping. Let's get it popping, y'all.
UAW and Ford reaching a tentative deal to end a nearly 6-week strike with the automaker. Phil LeBeau joins us this morning with all of the details that have been coming out overnight. Good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. This is a deal that came together. The final push was this week after the UAW called out a couple of strikes, one at Stellantis, one at GM, at some very profitable plants. Ford looked around and said, we're reporting earnings on Thursday. They're going to be strong. We want to be next in line for another strike. They finalized the deal. Tentative agreement calls for a 25% pay hike over the next 4.5 years. Goes over 30% when you add in cost of living adjustments. They're also reducing the number of wage tiers, a big push by the UAW. And there's more profit sharing for retirees.
So, couple different things. First, let me say congratulations to the members over at Ford Motor Company. I am not a sore loser. I'm not. Congratulations to the people and the UAW members over at Ford Motor Company. You get what you negotiate, not necessarily what it is that you think that you deserve. And so they bullied Ford. I think that Ford made a horrible deal, personally. I think that this is going to affect them long term. But one of the reasons that Ford Motor Company decided to do this was because they have earnings being reported today, and they seen what happened with GM. So they was all in solidarity. Ford, Chrysler, and GM was all in solidarity in order to make sure that they were holding it down, right? They were working together. They wasn't caving in. And Ford Motor Company said, we got earnings reported today. GM had a blowout quarter when they reported earnings a day or two ago. We about to report earnings. We had a blowout quarter for the third quarter. And we don't really want to muddy the waters anymore, so we're going to go ahead and take this 25% pay hike over the next 4.5 years. When you add cost of living adjustments, which is COLA, that takes it up to 30%. Now, the union originally was seeking a 46% increase. 46% increase over the life of the contract, and raising the rates that they were essentially working for on an hourly basis. And then that also included profit sharing for retirees. Now, I didn't even really know that retirees can still get profit sharing checks. Where they do that at? How do retirees still get a piece of the company after they retire? I think that was horrible. Reducing wage tiers, I 100% agree with that. I don't think that, or I also believe that there should be a pathway to being a permanent employee over a period of time. Now, the flip side is this. I don't feel sorry for the people that wind up working for the company, doing the same amount of work, but getting paid less. You know why? Because that is what happens in corporate America every single day. When you come in as a contractor, when I started working at the University of Michigan, I was not an employee, I was a contractor. And so what happened was I had to show and prove, and then I had to basically highlight how great I was at what it is that I did for a living. And then I had to put myself in a position to where I then had other opportunities. And then they made the decision that they couldn't live without me. Even though they couldn't compensate me as much as what I had on the table, I wasn't necessarily looking for the money at that time. I was just looking for the great benefits, and also I wanted to keep my match, and I wanted that tuition reimbursement and assistance in order for me to continue to further my education, because I had bigger plans down the line anyway. So my goal was never to stay at the university. My goal was to leverage it and then get to a point to where I would be able to move into upper management in private America or corporate America that is much, much different than what it was that I was experiencing at the university, but I took advantage of it. My point is this: in most instances, whether you're a software engineer, a cybersecurity professional, so on and so forth, in most instances, you don't go in as a direct hire unless there's a huge need for you and they're trying to make sure that they get you in because they can't live without you, or they see the value in you. On an individual basis, there are people every single day that do not get hired in, and they have to negotiate for what it is that they have and show and prove, not necessarily just have a pathway because they are who they are. But if they won that concession from the company, even though they were asking for 46% plus cost of living adjustments, they wound up getting 25%. They wind up lowering the 36%, and then they got 25%. The last that I heard, that Ford Motor Company and GM and Stellantis had a 23% pay hike over the 4.5 years of the potential contract. But now they wind up settling on 25% before they reported earnings, because they didn't want what happened over to GM to happen to them. Now, one thing that they're not talking about that they didn't get, that I absolutely applaud Ford for not caving in on, was the 32-hour work week. Family. The union was asking for 32-hour work weeks, and we don't know all of the details of the contract because they have to vote on it. More details of it is going to come out, so I'm going to continue to cover it, and then hopefully they can get back to work by next week. But they were asking for 32-hour work weeks and still to have 46% pay raises. And so they had to meet them in the middle somewhere. There had to be some concessions along the way, right? But let's continue to hear what this is.
Here's UAW President Shawn Fain talking with the membership last night on Facebook.
We send this contract to you because we know it breaks records. We know it will change lives. But what happens next is up to you all.
All right, so what is next for the UAW members who have been on strike? Some of them have been on strike since September 15th. They will go back to work soon. Exactly when remains to be seen, but they're not going to wait until it's finalized. The contract is ratified. The details will be spelled out for the membership on Sunday, and the ratification vote will take place after that. That remains to be seen. Likely in the next week, week and a half, you will.
Why is my wife sending super chats? I'm going to be reading the super chat shortly. I'll get there.
See them do some type of ratification vote. But again, the important part here is that they will go back to work soon, a matter of days, not waiting until it's finalized, whether that's a week and a half from now. All of this comes as you take a look at shares of Ford at a time when the company will be reporting its Q3 results. They come in after the bell, and there will be a conference call. Analysts are expecting earnings that are going to be up about 50%, 50% compared to the third quarter of last year.
Which is one of the reasons why Ford wanted to get this deal done before they reported earnings. I think that was a smart move for them, because I think it was going to be more difficult for them to be able to get the deal that they got now. But the problem with this whole agreement, from my perspective, and they're saying that earnings is up over 50%, Earnings is up over 50%. I've actually made $168 since I purchased GM yesterday. I'm going to hold on to it. They said that I made $168. The stock is up 3.5%, close to 3.5% since I purchased it yesterday. Let me go ahead and get that out there. Right here. My phone keep adjusting and making it brighter. I'll show it to you in a minute. But my point is that Ford wanted to get this done. But here's the problem, and this is the thing that people don't really understand. Ford is going to have to cut costs somewhere. They're going to have to cut costs somewhere in order to absorb these costs based off of what they were projecting to earn long term and to protect themselves and insulate themselves for the future. They're going to have to cut costs somewhere. They are going to have to drive out costs in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if they lower the research and development budget. I don't know if they drive it out with white collar workers. I don't know if they drive it out with product reductions. If they beat up on suppliers, how much that they're issuing out money from that perspective. But Ford is going to have to drive out the cost because you still have to realize that it's a publicly traded company and they have to answer to their shareholders.
Still strong demand, still strong pricing, especially on the F-150 and the SUVs. And as a result, that's going to be the focus of the conference call today. Not necessarily the Q3 results, but the impact of this contract agreement between the UAW and Ford. Again, that call is after the bell. They release after the bell, and then later tonight we'll get the Ford call. As for GM and Stellantis, they still have strikers in front of their plants. Three final assembly plants for General Motors, 2 for Stellantis. For GM, that strike has knocked out or stopped about 15% of its production in the United States. And for Stellantis, these strikes have now stopped about 11% of its production here in the U.S. So, guys, 1 down, 2 to go. Let's see how long it takes for the UAW to strike a deal with GM and Stellantis.
One of the things that people don't understand about automotive companies, especially traditional automakers, not Tesla, right? Because Tesla is literally the 4th automaker in the United States of America. But all automakers that's not at their core electric vehicle companies, they are not profitable when it comes to the technology that they're investing a lot of money into. They're investing a lot of money into battery technology, research and development, and they're trying to drive those costs out long term. That hopefully will work out for them, but they don't have the margins as far as the amount of profit that's sold per vehicle that Tesla may have, which is why Tesla is now starting to get into a pricing war in order to lower the cost, or they're lowering the cost of the vehicles while also lowering the cost of the production, which then drives the other automakers to continue to have to stick with internal combustion engines longer, which cost them more to continue to manufacture because there's more parts that's associated with it. And then last but not least, they have to pour more money into research and development. So essentially what is happening is this for traditional automakers. For Ford, Chrysler, GM, Toyota, Mazda, you name it, all of them that have internal combustion engines, when you go to the gas station, this is what's happening. They're largely depending on the huge profits that the UAW are striking for. So they're striking these plants in Arlington, Texas, and all of this stuff, right? And they're depending on these huge profits that come along with selling these big trucks that they can sell for over $100,000 on some of them. And they're depending on you to make your car payment and the finance companies to continue to issue out these subprime loans, because they then have to use that money in order to continue to invest in research and development for their future product. Now, one of the sticking points for the UAW was to write the strike for plant closures, which I believe that they got, but we're going to continue to iron out the tentative agreement later. And also on top of that was the battery plants and the technology going over to union members instead of it just being natural attrition and then eventually the plants going out of business, right? And the reason why that is because the cost to continue to manufacture it for Tesla is much cheaper. And even when it is, as far as how it is that they compensate their employees is based off of stock options and performance, which is similar to the CEO's pay, then what UAW members, they just want a higher cost of living, they just want a higher rate, and they want profit sharing checks. So they're not necessarily sharing in the pain and the profits, similar to how a Tesla is, but then at the same time, that cost is going to be built into the product no matter what. I remember when I worked for Local 600, and I was over at the Rouge factory, and one of the things that we would get was, what's the name of it? What was the name of it called? It was something that basically bridged the gap for when we got laid off. If and when we got laid off. So, for example, we would get laid off 2 weeks during the summer in order for them to be a plant turnover and all of that stuff, right? And what would happen was whenever we got unemployment pay, the company then allowed for us to get the difference through the company themselves. And so we basically got our same pay even though we were laid off. I don't know if they still do that. I don't know if that's a part of the tentative agreement. Again, I'm going to comb over it. As soon as it's released to the general public, I'll break it down to you guys from sub pay. That's what it's called, Brittany. We used to get sub pay. So sub pay is basically the difference between what you would get in your normal pay in your 40 hours and then what you were getting from your unemployment check, right? The company would then pay the difference in order to bridge you over, and that was a part of our agreement with the UAW, right? And so we always made sure that we were making the same amount of money regardless, and the only time that we would lose money is if there was a potential strike. We would get sub pay. Yep. So I'm guessing y'all still get sub pay. I haven't been in a plant in a long time. But yeah, I don't know if this is a great deal for Ford, but it was the best that they can do considering the circumstances, and they had to get this out. So now what they're going to do is they're going to try to drive costs out in other parts of the business. Here's the caveat, though. Here's the caveat. What happens 4.5 years from now? Ford has a decision to make. Ford has a decision to make 4.5 years from now. UAW members have a decision to make 4.5 years from now. In 4.5 years, your life can be completely different. In 4.5 years, your life can be completely different. You do not want to go through this again, because in 4.5 years, either Ford is going to have to do a combination of passing the cost over to consumers. We don't know what the situation is going to be. It could be another pandemic. It could be a recession. It could be a housing crisis. It could be anything. In 4.5 years, your life can be completely different. And this is what you want to look at it as from both perspectives. From one perspective, Ford is going to have to deal with the union again, asking for record profits, and they're going to do the same play, and they're going to do the same thing that they did before in order to continue to drive up the cost for employees as far as how much they're making, right? And so is Ford over the next 4.5 years going to try to insulate themselves and protect themselves by being prepared for this and not being subjected to it, considering that now they know what the play is from the UAW? The other side of the coin is it possible that there will still be natural attrition, especially considering that we have artificial intelligence, electrical vehicles, less manufacturing, and then more importantly, robotics to then simplify the process as far as what it is that you guys are going to get? Do you want to, as a UAW member, still be in a position to where you're letting the fate of what it is that's going to happen to your family be determined by whether or not the union can continue to strike historical agreements again? Are you not taking advantage of the full benefit package that you have in order to put yourself through school? You can go into trade school. You can get tuition assistance. You can then study. Over the next 4.5 years, you can now have more options than ever if you leverage this and you play this the way that you're supposed to. If you leverage this and play this the way that you're supposed to, you can have more options than ever before. You do not want to be interdependent on a company in the UAW in order to save your job, because you don't know what's going to happen. Every profit sharing check, every minor detail that's happening in your life, you want to make sure that you're lowering your cost of living. Don't use this as an opportunity to then adjust your lifestyle according to how much money you're going to be making. Hear me out. Hear me very, very clearly. You do not want to let this contract go to waste. If you are a person and you just got your job or whatever, you want to go the opposite way from what you would normally do things. Don't go out and buy a new car. Don't use this cost of living adjustment. Don't use this raise in order to continue to live a better lifestyle. Don't go out and buy another house. Don't go out and go shopping and none of that. These next 4.5 years can transform your life, and you can completely not be interdependent on this company. It doesn't mean that you have to leave the company. If it makes sense for you long term, then do so, but don't be dependent on it in order for you to survive long term. If you are a member of the union, GM, y'all about to probably come to a tentative agreement also. Chrysler, y'all too. Well, Stellantis, we call it Chrysler here in Detroit. But what I'm trying to tell you guys is go back to school, lower the cost of living in your own household. Start to lower and then spend more money on your investments. You know, everything that I make, my personal expenses is less than $1,000. Every single thing that I make, I'm going to be absolutely transparent with you. I throw it all into investments. If this thing go away tomorrow, and a lot of these bag chasers, a lot of these Patreon members, you know how much I make. You know what it is that I make on my regular job. You know what I make with my W-2s. You know what I make on YouTube. I'll be absolutely transparent with you. And the Patreon members can tell you. They've seen it. I've logged into my accounts. There's plenty of people that actually know how much I make from YouTube. I make over $100,000 a month on YouTube. That is a fact. If you want to see it, you're more than welcome to log into the Patreon and see it for yourself. I make well over $100,000 a month off of YouTube, and none of these YouTubers and none of these content creators can touch me. unless you one of the big dogs, you can't really touch me. I make over 100. One of the things that I do when I give over into my Patreon members and my bag chasers is the secrets of how it is that I'm able to monetize. And that's just from AdSense. That don't have nothing to do with sponsorships. That has nothing to do with licensing. That has nothing to do with interviews. It has nothing to do with long-term prospects and what it is that I'm leveraging the content for. I make, and this is just a fact, I make over $100,000 a month on YouTube. That is a fact. I make over $500,000 a year on my regular job. That is a fact. You can go and look at my W-2s. You can go and look at what it is that I got going on YouTube. I make over another $500,000 a year on my web development company. That is a fact. I make over $39,000 a month in real estate. That is a fact. I average $2,300 a month in rent per property for 17 properties going forward, and I'm continuing to build them. But my personal expenses is less than $1,000 a month. Well, why is that? Well, Anton is very, very careful, because if it's not a business expense, then I will not at all, in any way, shape, or form, spend money on it. That's number one. Number two, everything that I make has to go into what it is that I'm investing in long term, because I have a number that I am trying to hit to where I never, ever, I'm already in a space to where I never have to work again, right? The other side of it is I want my investments to be able to maintain my lifestyle when I decide that I want to retire from all of this. So I plow everything I can into making sure that I reduce my tax burden while also building up the amount of money that I'm making passively. 95, 96, 97% of everything I make goes into the businesses. Reinvesting in myself, right? I have that safety net. I'll always be able to make whatever it is that I'm making. Somebody said I'm capping. Well, go into the Patreon and look at it for yourself. I show all of my people my receipts. My receipts are there. So we don't have to depend on what it is that I say. All you got to do is go and look at my W-2s. All you got to do is go and look at what it is that I'm building and my real estate and my properties that I'm showing. You can go and look at my numbers. You can go and look at what it is that I generated. You can go and look at my reports. You can go and look at my direct deposits. You can go and look at my brokerage account. It's all right there on YouTube. It's all right there. People that are part of on this live stream right now, they've seen it. The point that I'm trying to make for you guys is this. You have a unique opportunity to invest in yourself to where you no longer have to be dependent on this strike. You no longer have to be interdependent on this strike in order to make sure that all of this is going the way that you're supposed to go. All right? That's all I want to share with you guys. Let me see a little bit more of what it is that he has to say.
Hey, Phil, how do you expect this to go with the other companies? Is this a blueprint, basically? And from what I heard, what is it, 25% of a pay increase? Is that the expectation that GM and Stellantis have to step up to that? Or are there other outstanding issues that are different at those two companies versus Ford?
The contracts will be similar, but there are differences. Let's take Stellantis. A big push from the UAW is to reopen the plant just outside of Rockford, Illinois, Belvidere. It's the Belvidere plant. They shut down production. They idled it earlier this year. They have no intention on restarting that plant. Stellantis does not. And they've made that clear all along. They want to right-size their capacity in the United States. Well, the UAW is like, we want that plant reopened. So what happens with that plant? Do they repurpose it as a mega hub for parts and distribution? One idea that has been floated out there. That's not the same level of pay as a final assembly plant. So that's one area, one example, Becky, where the contract with Stellantis has different sticking points than the contract with Ford or the contract with GM. But they're generally speaking, in terms of the wage increase, they're generally going to be in the same area. Expect them likely to come in that 25%.
To that point, Phil, just speak to this. How far does this trickle out? Meaning, I know we're talking about these specific companies, but, you know, all of the suppliers, everybody that's in this ecosystem is now going to effectively try to trade, and the employees specifically, even those that are non-unionized, are going to use these as new baselines for everything or not?
Yep. Yes. Now, do I think that they're going to get 25% for some of these suppliers? No, I don't think they're going to get 25%. But you're right, Andrew. This resets the map across the board in the auto industry, not only for UAW supplier shops, but also for non-union ones. And in terms of final assembly, we've talked about this for some time. You can bet that the pay is going to go up for Honda plants, Toyota plants, all of the non-union foreign automaker plants in this country. The pay for those workers will go up. It's not going to be as much as they are at the UAW shops, but it will go up.
Is it doable for Ford to stay wildly profitable? And do they have to stay with ICE? They have to stay with internal? We're going to hear something from them similar to what we heard from GM. I mean, you know, the good times are rolling right now. Money's rolling in, but the minute, you know, there's inventory sitting on the lot that people don't want, are the taxpayers going to end up stuck with this, what is a pretty big pay increase here?
Well, first of all, I don't think we're to a point where we're talking about taxpayers being stuck with a pay increase.
That's what people are worried
about. For Jim
about.
Farley and
That's
for
the way
Bill
it always
Ford.
happens. That's the way it always happens.
Joe, it's a separate discussion. Let's just talk about this one in terms of what Bill Ford and Jim Farley have to do. They have to thread the needle here. They're not giving up on electric vehicles. They believe, and most in the auto industry believe, almost everybody in the auto industry believes, the future is with electric vehicles.
And it's coming, because anytime that the government incentivizes you and they starting to add infrastructure updates in order to get it, it's coming.